Hey guys, really quick, I wanted to take a second and talk about podcasting. Why? Because this medium has been the greatest thing to ever happen to me. A little over 5.5 years ago, I bought a $60 microphone and everything in my life has changed. I've gone on to build a successful business, live events, a lucrative speaking career, and I've been able to connect and become friends with some of the most influential thought leaders in the world, all because of podcasting. Now, you might not know this about me, but I've also helped multiple other people do the same thing. I usually work one-on-one with high-ticket clients to help them really build their brand. But so many people were asking me, Justin, I need to know the secret. So I've actually put together a masterclass. So if you head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, you can sign up for the masterclass today and learn exactly how I've been able to build this business, and you can too. This course is for wannabe podcasters and also podcasters who aren't getting the results that they want. Again, head over to purposedrivenpodcaster.com, grab your masterclass now, dive in, and take your life to the next level. Welcome to the Growth Now movement. I'm your host, Justin Shank. I'm an entrepreneur, speaker, and podcaster who years ago decided to go on a journey on how to grow in all areas of my life. What I found out was it's really a matter of focusing on the 4 pillars of life: business, relationships, spirituality, and wellness. And that's what we do here. We explore how to continuously grow in those areas, all while having a ton of fun doing it. I'm really excited you're on this journey with me. Now let's get to this week's episode. This week, I sat down with Bobby Sausalito, aka TakeNaps, on Instagram. Bobby is a comedian, commentator, and internet personality, most notably recognized on Instagram as @TakeNaps. He self-proclaimed loudmouth New England Guido, living in South Florida and making comedy videos about anything and everything, and most recently about government mishandlings of certain things in the world, COVID, and so much more. This conversation is very real, raw, open. I share a lot of my opinions on what's going on in the world, and obviously Bobby does as well. But we also talk about what's most important, which is thinking for yourself and making sure that we're not being controlled by some sort of narrative, no matter what side you're on when it comes to everything that's happening. It's about doing the research and making your own choices. I think you guys are absolutely going to love this conversation. Again, no matter what side you're on. Now, before we get to the episode, I want to remind you guys that Growth Now Summit Live is right around the corner. So get your tickets right now, growthnowsummit.com. Tickets are on sale. We have about 60 left, and I believe you guys are going to be blown away by the experience we are creating. growthnowsummit.com. Grab your tickets now. And now, without further ado, let's get to the episode with Bobby Sausalito. Bobby, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
Dude, I'm really excited / nervous about this conversation. I was telling you a little bit before I hit record. Some of the stuff we're going to get into may be controversial to a lot of people. I know that I have an audience that's on both sides of the fence, but I feel like it's an important conversation to have to maybe open up some eyes. But before we get into that stuff, tell us a little bit about who is Bobby Sauce? Where'd you come from, man? What's your backstory? We'll start there and then we'll get into some more information.
So I was born and raised in Connecticut. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, wanted to work from home, wanted to be in control of my own destiny, knew at a very early age that if I picked something and ran with it for the duration of my life, that it would take me where I wanted to go. Very early on, identified that the internet was going to be the vehicle that would ultimately take me there. Figured out my way via online training, YouTube, and reading blog posts, how to build websites. Taught myself how to be what I would consider to be kind of like a world-class web developer, built thousands of websites and started my own business, did that for about 13 years. Was getting to a point where I kind of felt like I wasn't using my magic, so to speak. I was like, I don't know that if I was at my funeral today, I would want to be, he's the website guy. It didn't seem like that was my purpose on earth. I just knew that it was a path that would ultimately get me where I needed to go. I started creating videos on social, kind of in memoriam of a quote I had heard from a friend, which was, you never want to let the music die on your lips. And I just kept thinking to myself, if I died today and I didn't put my real personality out there instead of the suit and tie web developer that I was trying to portray, that I would be doing an injustice to my personality. So I started making some videos on Instagram about a variety of different things, kind of unsure as to what the purpose would be of them, but just knew that I wanted to be creative. As I started to pay attention more to the upcoming election in 2020, I had always paid attention to politics, but I was like, I was like, man, this is getting real crazy. Like, what an outrageous situation this is. And then put the lockdown and the sickness and all of this other stuff out there. And it was like, I just saw the world starting to get real nuts, and all of the lies and all of the mistruths that politics kind of smeared all over the people for many, many, many years was now hitting home. It was like, you can't go out after 9 p.m. You can't go to a restaurant. You have to stay at home. And I started to see all of the kind of like your worst fears finally start moving into lockstep and really affecting everyday people. So I started making videos about it, just merely to vent my own frustration, because I couldn't, no one in my social circle was willing to talk about it. Started making a few videos, and then on August 20th, 2020, I had a video blow up overnight, 65,000 views in one day. I had 1,100 followers at the time. I figured, let me see if I could do it again. The next day, 2 days later, I made another one that did about 50,000. And I said, what if I make one every day until the election? What would happen? And, here we are at about 89,000 followers on Instagram, over 20,000 on Facebook, growing on TikTok, 15,000 there, and 2 or 3 or 4,000 in some other platforms. And I'm now doing this pretty much for the most part full time.
Yeah, dude, and that's so quick. Like, you think about how quickly that happened for you. The election leading into 2020. And let's talk a little bit about that realization for yourself, right? I think we're now 2 years into this thing, and people still aren't opening their eyes, and the realization of what's happening in the divide. I mean, I had a guy on the show. He wrote a book called The Second Civil War, and he talked about politicians wanting divide for control and so on and so forth. But people are still sitting at home going, oh no, we're good. This is America. Nothing's going to happen to us, but it's happening. Like, what was your realization? Like, I listened to a little bit of your backstory when you were on Andy Frisella's podcast, and you talked about how, like, you used to be on what is the other side. Like, what was the realization?
Well, I think that in 2000, I voted for Barack Obama the first go around. And I remember just being like, wow, what a great thing for America. I had paid attention to politics, but only just a little bit. It was the first election that I was eligible to vote in age wise. And after several years of it and coming out of the financial collapse, I just kept thinking to myself, the theoretical leaders that are supposed to be in charge and act like they have everything under control are screwing my generation in so many ways. It's like, is there going to be any Social Security? There all of a sudden all the banks collapse. And then you watch all these documentaries about how it was totally predictable. And it just seemed like the system was in a lot of ways rigged against pretty much everybody but the powerful elite and connected class. That's not race. That's not gender. That's not sexual orientation. It's just the powerful elites, as it were, have run of the entire planet. And as I started to become more kind of frustrated with it, I realized that it was making me depressed, basically. Not depressed in life, but depressed. Like, if you wake up every day and you watch Jones, for example, you watch Alex Jones, or you watch some of this stuff and you're like, wow, we're living in like a soon to become biomedical control state. And the entire world is run by psychotic international banking cartels that are hell bent on destroying the world's population. It ruins your day. So I just got really frustrated by that. And I was like, I can't do this. But then when I saw Ron Paul come around the next election, I was like, this is the first guy that's actually speaking a language that I can understand. He's talking about how overbearing government and spending all this money is creating so many problems. We got to get out of these foreign wars. And I just thought that Ron Paul was kind of like a light through all of this garbage. Once he was gone, I kind of reverted back where I'm just like, they got it in the bag. They've got it under control. There's nothing that your average person can do. But then when Donnie came on the scene years later, my initial kind of visceral reaction was the same as everyone else. Like, this guy's kind of an asshole. And he's not somebody that really exhibits what you would consider to be leadership qualities. And I was like, you know what? That would be unfair of me, knowing what I know about the structure, to just assume this guy is bad. Let me just look at what he does policy to policy and see if I agree. And as time went on, I realized how corrupt and backwards every piece of information that the corporate media and really society, the people around you, tell you. And I just started realizing this guy could represent a massive paradigm shift in the control aspect of what's going on. And that kind of brought me into really paying attention to it, because for the first time ever, I finally thought that maybe I could be the president. Here's a guy that didn't isn't a skull and bones or whatever you want to say, doesn't have a last name of a previous president, that literally was just a businessman and public figure, and was able to do it. And so that just kind of reinvigorated my belief that a single person and or a movement of the right ideas could make massive change. And that kind of brought me back into the fray and got me starting to pay attention again.
Yeah. And I love that quote that you said earlier about I forget what it was, the music on your lips or the lyrics on your lips. Like, you don't want to die with them there. And, you began to speak out, and I love the way you approach it, because it is it's comedic, but serious, right? Like how you approach it is in a very, very funny way. And I feel like, and I imagine you experience some of this, like it makes people stop and go, oh, wait, hold on a second. I can laugh at this, but there's something real and kind of scary when it comes down to this stuff. Because I mean, we're talking about the 2020 election and him losing after 4 years, and Biden comes in. And this, by the way, I always like to say, like, I'm an independent, by the way. I don't say I'm a Republican or a Democrat. I'm very much independent. I'm very much in the middle with most things. But what I'm seeing now is just power is power, and it's bad. Right. And so when you approach this thing in your comedic approach, what are you seeing in the world that you felt like, I need to be the voice to this? And did you even think that you could make a shift, or was it like, hey, I got some views, let me just keep doing this?
Well, I think that something that I realized at an early age was, you either have to believe that you're very special or you won't be. And I just remember thinking to myself, am I going to go through life not believing that I could be the greatest to ever do it at whatever it is that I decide to do? Like, if I don't believe that that's possible, it's certain that it will not be the case. So I was like, not only do I have to believe it internally, but I also have to believe it when I say it to other people. I have to hear myself saying it. I have to do things that help me internally and externally validate that that actually is the case. And I have to kind of look at life as I have tremendous capacity, perhaps beyond anything that I could ever even anticipate. And I remember thinking to myself, and I've told this story before on Brad Lee's podcast, is like, there was this one day where I went out to the center of this lake on mushrooms, and I was like, I'm going to determine what life is about. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, if I could pick any vehicle to have the greatest impact on the entire world, I would be right here in this body with this mindset, with this everything right here, right now. And this is how I would do it. I would be born in 1987. I would be an English speaking, an male in America. And it's just like that to me would be if I don't have an advantage to make lasting change in the world and leave it a better place, then who does? Because there's a guy in Uganda with one arm that was born into poverty that has changed the world. And there's been a variety of other people that have had every disadvantage imaginable. I have loving parents, loving family, loving friends, a good head on my shoulders, a decent education, grew up in Connecticut, English speaking, US citizen. It's like, if I can't do it, then how did they do it? So I just started to believe very early on that I could really make a lasting change in something. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew that as long as I built up the attributes and building blocks that would provide me value when I ultimately got there, that it would make sense when it made sense. When I started making these videos and they clicked, I just thought it was one of those things that's kind of inherent where you're like, that's it. That would be the way that would take me to the next place. And is that going to be it forever? Who knows? But it was the same way when I saw the internet. I'm like, it's 2006. No one knows how to build a website. I'm building a website for $2,000 that I could do in my sleep. And a guy that's 45 years old has no idea what I'm talking about. This could be a vehicle that could make me, that could bring me an advantage in the marketplace. And in this particular instance, I was like, when you see it, you see it. And I thought to myself, could this be the purpose? Could this be the heroism that also has fun and entertainment and enjoyment in it? I didn't want to lead into battle. I didn't have the bravery to be a service person and go into the military, but I knew that I wanted to do something. And this just surfaced. And I was like, this could be a duty, like a patriotic cause. And not just this patriotic cause, like I'm going to go be a senator, but I'm going to be entertaining. I'm going to use my skills. It's going to be something that I could do forever. And it hopefully could have some lasting impact and change.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that leap, right? You obviously talk about the entrepreneurial leap at a young age and said, hey, I know I know how to do this and I can do it well, and people will pay me good money because they have no idea what they're doing. By the way, when I was your age, back then when I was 24, 25, I still didn't know how to build a website, still had to pay somebody. So like, you had this skill that so many other people didn't have. But when you take that leap, it can be scary, right? And a lot of people are really afraid of some sort of success, that they're going to lose their friends. They're not going to be on the same level. And all of a sudden their whole entire world changes. But now you've done it at such a level because there's such a divide in the world. There's so much mask, not max, vax, not vaxxed, whatever, right? Republican, Democrat, whatever. And you decided to lean real heavy on the one and start talking about this at a high level. Was there a fear there of like, oh my God, I'm going to lose people that I hold dear because I'm speaking out?
100%. And I've told this story as well. I used to smoke a ton of weed. And when you smoke weed, you think that you're being creative, but you ultimately end up spinning your wheels. And what happens when I would be high at night, for example, it's like, I would think about how I would question myself, and I would have all this self-doubt. And I remember the night that I posted the day that I posted that first video, and it was starting to take off, and I was getting some like negative text messages and some negative DMs and negative comments and stuff, and people saying mean things or whatever. I just remember thinking to myself, like, do I just cut it here? Because if I just delete this video, it stops. I could make my profile private, and just like that, all the gas ends. And I'm so thankful that I quit smoking weed about a month and a half before that, because I just thought to myself, like, that would be something that somebody with doubt would do. It's like, if I stay on the side of fear, I'm right where I was yesterday. If I just plow into it and take and go into the light, the worst that could happen is that I fall back to where I already was. And if people are going to hate on me, this is just one ecosystem. This was just on Instagram. It's like, If I was in the town square in my hometown and everyone I knew was there, and I had a house and a business and it was everything, I have to admit it would have been a little bit more challenging. But to know that I could just like, boop, delete it and like disappear into the abyss gave me a little bit more confidence that I could do it and face whatever it was. And on top of that, I feel like when you like I was telling you before, I'm 34 now. I was 33 when this happened. Had it happened 5 years earlier, I think that I would have had a little bit less self-confidence and assuredness in myself, where it was like, I've made lots of mistakes. I've gone through business ups and downs. I've slept on an air mattress. I've woke up with a cockroach on my face. I've done things that have been really challenging. So it's like, oh, what happened? I'm going to lose my theoretical friends. Those are not friends if they're going to leave because of a disagreement of view on the world. Anybody that really loves me would never do that. And I just thought to myself, this is one of those, and even though it kind of seems like I'm overinflating my self-worth, it's like, this is a dare to be great situation. I was like, this is what needs to be said. And this shit is true. And I believe this. And if it could cause something good, I'm willing to take some arrows for it. And on top of all that, and not that I'm like a huge praise Donnie, but like, I remember just thinking to myself, this guy has every single person on the planet just being like, you're a racist, like hating on him, things that are probably so not true. And he just goes out there and keeps doing it. And I'm like, if a human person can withstand that level of hatred in their direction, then why can't I? It's like, I'm doing it in a small micro focused area. So I was just like, let's just see what this has to offer. And interestingly enough, a lot of those quote unquote friends have faded off, and so many new relationships and opportunities have created as a result that I'm so thankful that I didn't hit that button that night, because I would be lying if I say that I didn't sincerely consider it.
Yeah, no. And it's so true too, right? There's always going to be haters no matter what you do. I remember when the podcast started to take off and I started to get but this is before I had any social media presence. It was just really the podcast. And I started getting emails of people saying like, how you're terrible at this. I don't understand why you get to interview these people. Like, I'm like, what is happening right now? And it's very much like, okay, I'm just going to keep going, but there's a fear in putting yourself out there. And I think a lot of times when people are lying on their deathbed, they look back at that moment that they could have leaned in and they don't. And there's great regret there. Right. And obviously, like you said, you formed so many great relationships from there. I mean, I don't have a lot of the same friends I did 5 years ago, but at the same time, my friendships that I've formed based off of putting myself out there and trying to build a platform have been Absolutely insane. I think there's such power in that statement, right? Of pushing through the fear and really kind of embracing that. I want to talk a little bit about what's happening in the world right now and kind of what you've seen. Now, you're somebody who, and I've done hours of research, but I'm sure you've done hundreds of times more research than I have. And, you truly look into things, right? And when you talk to people, you go, wait, hold on, you read a headline, or wait, hold on, you saw the 30-second commercial that led into the news article or whatever, right? What's it been like diving into the facts of all the numbers going on here? And then you just literally going, how can we be this dumb? Like there's a thing there, right? Let's talk a little bit about that, what you're kind of seeing in the world.
Well, this has been, I think, the best way to explain this, because I've said this so many times to people. Even when I was really paying attention to politics, which was when I was building websites during the day and whatnot, I would say roughly 1 to 3 hours of political content per day, 5 days a week. On the weekends, I didn't listen to anything. But while I was building websites, I'd listen to Ben Shapiro or Steven Crowder, or I'd listen to some podcasts. I would listen to the Peter Schiff podcast while I was at the gym. So I would consume 1 to 3 hours of like political / economic news per day, 5 days a week. And that was a person that like really cared about politics and really felt that I was in touch and in the know. And I think that, and now I probably consume, I would say conservatively 5.5 hours a day, 7 days a week, or 6 days a week, if you average it all out, which means that in a given week now, I'm consuming what would have taken me 2.5 weeks to consume then. Your average person, even like lightly dabbles in politics, like goes and votes and cares, but like isn't that, they'll consume maybe 10, 15 minutes a day, maybe 30 minutes a day, which means that with me doing this full time, I'm in 1 month, I'm 1 year ahead of you in terms of how much I've consumed. And what I realize is that the vast majority of people don't consume that much because they're busy living their life. They don't want to know. They think it's out of their control, or they just believe that the system is rigged entirely, or that they feel like their opinion is not as valid as the next person, which it is. So when you look at that much content, you realize how obvious it is. And then you're just like, oh my God, you're like, I can't believe, even as what I would consider to be a fairly intelligent person before, that it was even more difficult for me to see how obvious it is versus now. Now it's like, it seems so blatant and so obvious that you just want to like shake every person you see. And it's hard to not fall into the trap and just be like, everybody's dumb. Because it's like, sometimes it feels that way, but it's like, it's not that they're dumb. It's just that sometimes they don't want to know. Sometimes they are afraid of knowing. Sometimes they just are busy with their life. I'm lucky enough. Well, not lucky enough, but I don't have kids. I'm not married. So I have this window of time that like your average person doesn't have. And I also identified that if I had a wife, if I had kids, if I had, parent teacher conferences to go to, just like that, even with all of my care, my ability to consume it for that much time would go down. So just like that, I become less informed. And I think that when you have this huge fraction of people of extreme power and limited power that cycle through versus ones that last forever, they just understand. Like, imagine if you had $1 trillion. Imagine if you had $100 billion, and all you had to think about with you and all of your cronies was like, how do we puppeteer the world? Well, there's lots of people that are like that, and they know, and they have sources where they can say, I got the best lawyers, I got the best doctors, I got the best psychologists. So it's like, they know that your average person and or the vast majority of people don't have the time to navigate the puzzle that they've created. So they can just hide in plain sight and slap you in the face with it. And most people are just like, yeah, but like, it's like, and then they'll go to the polls and they'll be emotionally manipulated to voting for more of it. And that's what's so sad, is you're just like, oh my God, it's so obvious. So what I realized was, if I'm going to have any effectuating or any effective change in this, I have to find a Trojan horse of the truth. And I feel that that's what comedy is. Comedy is the Trojan horse of truth. If I can find a way to make you entertained to consume something that is otherwise very important, highly important, in fact, then that would be the appropriate vehicle for me to distribute as much truth as possible. No one wants to watch stuffy political jargon on TV all day unless they can get a laugh, unless it's a little bit entertaining, unless it makes them not feel depressed. And I felt like that was the kind of very unique and specific path that would work for me.
Yeah, man. And it's funny because you're talking about comedy, and even comedy is getting muted right now. And what can I talk about? And I've had a number of comedians on the podcast and we've talked about that kind of thing. But you look at Dave Chappelle, as far as him getting canceled and attacked just for speaking up. And he's a comedian at the end of the day. Yes, he's a very well-educated comedian, but he's a comedian at the same time. But you're standing strong in this idea that comedy is the way to kind of open some eyes, right? And I think that's a lot of it. And I use the term, people are so dumb, but I laughed when I said it because it's really about taking the second of your day and looking around the corner and going, okay, well, why are they making these choices, right? Like what can I really pay attention to? And you've done videos about the vaccine and how these drug companies are making $98 million a day in profit, right? They can't be sued. They can't be attacked. There's nothing against them. So my girlfriend has 2 children who just yesterday came home from school, and the 8-year-old goes, 15 kids went home from school today because they were having a reaction to the vaccine. 15. And that's what she knew of.
Yeah, exactly.
But none of this is being seen. So what would you say to somebody who they're starting to go, okay, something doesn't seem right? Where's a good place they can go to kind of lift the rug up and really see what's happening here?
I think that the way that we save the world is by changing ourselves internally first. That's kind of like the overarching idea. And it's as simple as like, what do you think about? It's like, what do you think about during the day? Do you think about freedom? Do you think about the freedom and safety of your family? Do you think about the future generations? Do you think about the output that you leave on the world, the indelible mark, your legacy, as it were? Do you think about that stuff? So it's like, okay, if you first understand that in order to better yourself, you have to better yourself internally, better your own mind. That's also the best way to influence and make the world a better place. So once you agree on that, it's like, all right, the highest and best version of myself would do what things? They would understand the world around them. They would understand the key to their freedom. They would understand the key to their longevity, and they would understand people. So it's like, you need to understand your health. You need to be exercising and keeping yourself sharp of mind, sharp of body. That also plays into, okay, how do you keep your mind sharp? Well, you're going to read books. You want to read books that are going to help you succeed and be free in life. What makes you free in life? Money, prosperity, and the ability to communicate with people to make great things happen. Give positive things to the world. So you're like, all right, I need to understand money, my body, my health. The economy is a great way to understand money. How does the economy work? What influences it? What influences the economy is the political structure. These people are the only unnatural influences to a free market economy. If somebody strikes a pen, it can change the way the economy moves. No other business and or industry has that degree of power. So you have to understand who's running these, and the fact that we can, in theory, appoint those people. So once you understand that this is how the structure works, and that money is the instrument and tool of your freedom, even if you're healthy, if you can't go anywhere, if you can't move, you break your leg and you can't get good care, you're screwed. So once you understand all of these principles, it's like, well, what would the highest and best version of myself do on a daily basis to ensure all of these things? They would be well read and they would be well researched on both sides of every argument. They would look at every single thing that comes across their mind and say, question everything. So consume things on the right, consume things on the left. Watch CNN, watch CNBC, watch Fox News. Go online, look at Breitbart, look at Drudge Report, look at wearechange.org, listen to the Ron Paul Liberty Report, listen to the Peter Schiff podcast, Ben Shapiro, read Zero Hedge, and be a person that consumes lots of media. And if you do all of these things, you're going to start to see that you generally agree with one ideology versus the other more often than not. And even though it sucks that we're in this two-party trap, generally speaking, it's a great way of organizing your general view of the world. So I would say, I don't want to tell you what to think. I'd rather tell you how to think. And how to think is be a person that consumes a ton of information, because that is the key to your present and future success. And in your quest for better health and in your quest for better understanding of the economy and money and finances, the stock market, investing, and everything, you're going to come to politics as part of the game. And it's part of the equation, whether you like it or not. And then when you realize that politics now also affects your health, that you can go to a hospital and a doctor thinks that you should have this medicine, but for political reasons, you can't take that medicine or they can't give it to you. That's a problem. And that's how all of these things are intertwined. So I would just say, question everything, do more research, use the internet, use DuckDuckGo, use Google, and consume as much as possible, and use your own discernment and experience consuming media over a large span of time to assemble your worldview, and then follow different accounts on theoretically free social media platforms like Instagram, Facebook, Getter, Twitter, and whatever else, and just be a sponge of information. And instead of watching Dancing with the Stars, maybe do a little bit of a podcast, maybe go take a walk and knock out your exercise for the day and listen to something that's going to better your mind in that respect. And that's how you'll start to see the light of all these things and ultimately how the world becomes a better place, I think.
Yeah, dude, I love the fact that you said question everything. And I think that's kind of where it began for me. Like I started to lean more into, and I was a registered Republican my whole life from 18 on. And I started to lean more independent even before this whole thing, because I started to question everything. And I go, is it really in my best interest? And in fairness, in the beginning of COVID, like most people, even a lot of the people speaking up, like for the first 2 weeks to flatten the curve, I was like, holy shit, like this is like people's eyeballs are falling out. Like what's going on? Right. Because that's what we were being told. And all of a sudden I started to go, hold on a second. They're trying to push out this vaccine that normally takes 10 to 15 years for them to get a vaccine that's safe. They're trying to push it out in 6 months. And I go, I know the people in power want more power. They're funded by these pharmaceutical companies, and they control the media. And I go, I need to take a step back and question everything. And then as I made up my own mind and started to research, I did this experiment. This is very interesting, actually. I did an experiment where I decided to, for a couple of days, follow mainstream media and stop looking at like all, the accounts that I was following that were kind of leading me in a different direction and so on and so forth. Dude, I'm not even kidding. Within days, I started to worry again. It's so amazing how quickly we can be skewed by the individuals that are being controlled by the people who want more power. And so talk a little bit about that and what you're seeing, because I know you talk about that kind of thing and you dive into that whole thing. What are you seeing as far as their narrative, and what do you think they're trying to get to?
What do I think that the people in power are trying to get to?
Yeah.
I think that we have to understand that if you were to have anything in the world and you were to be, let's just call it like human nature, whatever, what would you want? If you had all the money in the world, what's left? You can't get any healthier than you can get. They're really the only thing. It's like, it's power. And whether we like it or not, we all seek power to some degree. Some people that lack a little bit more empathy may seek it for nefarious means, but generally speaking, the ultimate peace is power. So what does power mean, and why do people want power? It's like, well, you want power over your company. You want power over your mind and body. You want power over your community, so that because you believe that you have the best idea of what it would be. If you thought that you were smarter and or better than everybody else, for example, like I'm sure some people do, you would think that the world should be in your image, right? So if you were one of these people that grew up and your family had these heirlooms for centuries, and you're just like, I'm basically anointed because my bloodline is whatever. You could see we have all the riches in the world, more money. What would they want to do? They would want power and control. So what is the biggest threat to power and control? It's a unified, well-informed people. It's kind of like if you look at something, if you make it something very simple, like look at like slavery. They didn't want slaves to be able to read English or write, because then they could read a road sign and maybe navigate their way out of there. They don't want them to know that. They want to make sure that they know just enough and have just enough to stay working and toiling on their behalf. So in order to keep and maintain power in these small, close-knit groups, the only way that they can do it, because they already have money, is to have not only money, but have all of the control, and not only control over how the world works, but control over what the world even is. how many people there are, how much people can move about, how, what people think about, and whether or not they are allowed to communicate with one another. They don't want us unified, because the reality is that this is the sad reality that I've kind of realized in the last probably like 3 or 4 months. I used to think it was like money, power, control, and that's what it is. But really what it is it's like, it's good versus evil. And I really didn't understand what that meant. And I'm just like, what do you mean evil? It's like, these people don't care about people. It's hard for us to rationalize what goes on in the mind of a psychotic person, like a serial killer. You're just like, how could they do that? How could you stab one person, let alone 50? How could you commit all of these horrible things? And the reality is that it happens. And why? It happens because they have mental problems. It happens because they want power. They have some other issue. If you grew up in that environment, you would hate the fact that people go and have fun. You would hate the fact that somebody could have a great free life just on their own, that they didn't have all the money and power and what prestige that you had. So you would want to control the world in your likeness. You would want to control the money, how people act, where they go, which pieces that you're able to manipulate. And you would love nothing more than making a game out of it and gamifying it. How hilarious would it be if I was so insane that I could tell them straight to their face that this doesn't exist when I know it exists? Well, how hilarious that would be. Me and all of my bros are smoking a stogie with a $5,000 glass of whiskey, laughing about how, look at these plebes, look how stupid these minions are. That it's like a joke to them. And I think that in a lot of ways, you're dealing with psychotic people that are controlled by forces of evil. I'm not saying it's biblical. I'm not making it about religion. I'm just saying that the world, if we've learned anything from our surroundings, it's that duality is real and that there's good and evil. There's yin and yang for the world. And for all the good versus all the bad, I would say that the people in power understand that there are more good people than there are bad people. There are more of us than there are of them. Mm-hmm. And that represents the greatest threat to evil prevailing. And they need to divide us, keep us separated, keep us subservient, non-masculine, not in control, uneducated, and emotionally manipulated to the point where we'll do whatever they want in lockstep at a moment's notice. And also, if now in 2021, 2022, you can distribute that message to make them bow to their knees in a moment's notice at a quicker pace than any time in human history, imagine the degree of control you have then. Imagine how quickly you'd be able to lock it in for eternity if you could convince everybody that you stealing all of their wealth away was in their best interest. It's for the climate. It's for the save democracy or whatever BS they want to tell us. It's like they're laughing right in our face, and it's so obvious that it's just like, I honestly feel like they're just playing a sick game in the same way that a serial killer plays with the cops, like the Zodiac killer writing notes. They're just playing a game. People aren't people to them, and it's me, it's my power, it's evil, it's no regard for other human life. And I think that for us to act like that is not a real thing or doesn't exist, is being kind of ignorant to reality, I guess.
It's scary, man. And I think a lot of times entrepreneurs specifically were a little bit more aware of it early on, right? Because we busted our asses to get to where we are. And all of a sudden they're shutting us down. We have a mutual friend in the restaurant industry who we were texting early on. He's like, I'm losing $5 million a week. Yeah. And you go, whoa, hold on a second. Like this isn't right. Whereas the people who go to work every day and they're miserable every single day and they come home and they go through the thing and the next day they wake up and do it all over again. All of a sudden they're at home and they go, here's quote unquote free money. Right. We're playing into a really, really scary system when they're taking away our ability to make our own money and handing us money and saying, look how great this is. You didn't even have to work and here's money. Right. And that's the greatest ultimate play for them to go, here's the little game. Let's see what happens. And that's why every restaurant I walk into now, they're understaffed or they've cut their hours back or they've lost days. And every single place that I go, hospitals included, are understaffed right now, which means people fell into this trap. So how, again, I mean, I think that the question for everybody on the side of question everything is how do we help continue to wake other people up to say, hey, look, we need to stand up together because it's us versus them, not me versus you.
Yeah. Well, I think that the the real American spirit and the American story is kind of the premise of it is altruism, which is essentially caring about the well-being of others regardless of oneself. And that's kind of like the American story. We have to understand that real altruism is caring about the freedom and prosperity and quality of life of your present day fellow human being and also future, and recognizing the sacrifices of the past that have brought us to this point. So it's like, if you understand that America objectively has done more good for the human beings of Earth than any developed country in the history of time, even with all of its bad, it has done an overwhelming amount of good. If you believe that to be true, then you have to think to yourself, well, how? The reason that it was able to do that is because of the unrelenting altruism of hundreds of thousands, if not tens of millions of people over a long spans of time, where they were just like, we need to protect this for the future generation. The fact that you can walk down the street with no gun in the middle of the night and go to a park preserved at the end of your road and look at the moon and then go home and be under a roof and be free to go online and say the government is shit and not have someone come to your door and boot it in is not by happenstance, because this evil has existed since the beginning of time. So I feel like eventually we get to this point where we're just like, I have to give something back to this. I have to give the world something. The question is what am I going to give it? And I do believe that for any well-oiled machine to work properly, any well-oiled business, you have to put people that take their advantages, and you have to put them into a place where they can really thrive, and then have them perform that specific function to a very high efficiency consistently forever. So if we could all just do all those things I mentioned before, have real great self-awareness, understand what our position is in the world, believe that the world is so great because of a nation like America and the people that have come before it, and then try to figure out where is the place where we have an advantage where we can give back to it, and what would that look like, and identifying what your piece is in the business of the world, in the machine of the world, where you can leave it better than you got here. It doesn't mean that you can't take all that you deserve or whatever that the people before have laid out for you, but what's your give back? And it's going to be different for everybody. For some, it's sacrificing their body in war. And thank God for those people. For others, it may be you study law and now you're a lawmaker. It could be that you're a community organizer. It could just be that you're a doctor or you're a nurse or whatever your piece is. And then in that individual position, you do everything that you can to broadcast that same altruism, liberty, freedom, justice for all people, everyone treated equally, teaching people about prosperity, how to be healthy, not only in heart, body, and mind, but also financially healthy, and figuring out where in that game you can be, and then taking that skill, the thing that you're the best at, and basically broadcasting as much of it as fast as you can, not only in your day-to-day life and in your actions, but in your immediate social circles, and then kind of expanding it out beyond that as far as you could possibly take it. One thing that I think about all the time is like, if I didn't do X, I would be doing a disservice to my capacity. I've heard Jesse Itzler say before, he's like, we all under index to our capacity. He's like, I could never do 100 pull-ups in a day. And in his book, Living with a SEAL, sure enough, Goggins gets him to do 100 pull-ups. He's like, you're going to do 1,000 pull-ups by the time this is all done. And sure enough, he does the 1,000 pull-ups or whatever it was. The point is that we all under index to our capacity. And if we could understand that we have a great deal to give back, and if we all just contributed in our own little way, all of these problems would be fixed. But it really starts in here, and simply talking about it and taking care of yourself and your immediate social circle is the best way to move in that direction. And I think that all great things ultimately span out from there.
No, I love that, man. And doing the things to take care of yourself, right? Like just like you were saying, I mean, so many people don't do that, especially when we live in this fear-driven world that we're in right now, right? I mean, it's absolutely terrifying for some people. Now I want to make it clear. Like I'm not sitting here and you're not saying these things on Instagram to say COVID isn't real. COVID exists. Whether you believe it came from a bat or if Fauci funded the whole thing, that's up to you. But the reality is, like, it's a real thing, right? I had a buddy I grew up with, an old buddy I grew up with. His dad just passed away from it or with it. And so you go, okay, cool. It's a real thing. And so none of this is ever to say, hey, I'm taking this away from you. But if I shut off my phone, if I shut off the internet, if I didn't read a newspaper or watch the news, it wouldn't exist in my world. And I know I know that's just crazy to say. And so they're using this thing that if you're able to shut off media, which we can't in today's society, but if you could, it wouldn't even affect you in any way, shape, or form. So start taking care of yourself. Now, have you left Florida during this time, or have you been safe in Florida this whole time?
No, yeah, I've left a number of times. I've gone to DC, I've gone to California to visit my family, I've gone to Vegas, I've gone a variety of different places. After the initial everybody's afraid what's going to happen here, I started traveling. I visited a friend in Maine, so I've actually been to quite a few places.
Yeah, I've been all over too. And like, it's really crazy to see the difference state by state too, right? Like, yes. You know, Ron DeSantis seems to be doing a very good job down in Florida where your numbers are continuously going down. Now I'm in Pennsylvania, by the way, which apparently we're one of the worst states. That's where I live. We're one of the worst states when it comes to everything. But I mean, I've lived my life very normally, but then I've been to California and went, whoa, this is like a different world at this point. And I think a lot of people, their eyes aren't even open to that either. Now, I imagine if I lived in that world and never left California, I would be afraid just as much as everybody else, because I'm like, well, if everybody's wearing a mask, like I should worry too, right? So what would you say to those people, again, that they're having a hard time getting out of their own way, right? They've gone down, they've played this role for so long, they can't change, right? Is there a possibility that they can?
Yes. Well, I'll say two things. There's this book by Sebastian Junger called Tribe, and it talks about how people kind of inherently want to be in large groups, and people want to be on the winning team. They want to be on the side of the disposition of all of the people around them. It's just natural human nature. No one wants to be alone in the argument. And this explains the Salem witch trials, for example. It's like, that's a witch. And everyone was like, yep, I guess she's a witch. Like, I don't want you to think I'm a witch. So everybody just falls in line. And I think that there's this really cool video online that's from this music festival called Sasquatch. And there's a YouTube video of this guy dancing Sasquatch, and he's dancing by himself. And people in the video are like, yo, look at this like idiot guy. And they're recording him laughing at him. And then one guy comes over and starts dancing, and he starts killing it. And then another guy, and then another guy. And before you know it, there's this massive crowd of people ripping, and people are sprinting over to dance next to this guy, to the point where they even acknowledge this massive dance pod, which if you've ever been to the Gorge in George Washington, is like way up on the hill. And I believe the artist even acknowledges like, hell yeah, to all the people that are jamming up there. And it's just a perfect example of how the general psyche of humanity goes, where it's just like, if there weren't a small group of individuals that were convicted in something, none of the greatest things that we've ever had would be things. If Martin Luther King said, well, you know, I probably can't do it. If Rosa Parks said, well, I can't do it. If Harriet Tubman was like, I'm out, I'm about to just stay out, like whatever. If those things happen throughout history, through all of these great people, if George Washington didn't lead his men through battle through freezing temperatures where they had no food, it's like, imagine the ripple effect of that through the hands of time. So it's like, if you can't start with yourself and figure out how to cross that bridge, all is lost. It's like stopping a habit, like stopping smoking cigarettes. No matter how many people tell you it's bad to smoke cigarettes, it says on the box, you will get cancer from the cigarette. It literally could be like your name. It could be like, Bobby, you're about to die from this cigarette. People would be like, well, you know, if you don't want it, it's impossible. If you don't want the change, if you don't believe that the world needs you, if you don't believe that you have a special and unique talent that the world needs, then the world won't need you and you will do nothing. And it's like, there's this other amazing quote where it's like, the best way to avoid criticism is to do nothing, say nothing, be nothing. And that's the thing. It's like if we don't understand that the very small actions of small groups of individuals have been the only thing that have ever changed the world, if we can't recognize that, we're doomed. And on top of all that, to get it even more granular, to go simply down to the core of it all, if you scan a brain when a new thought is created, it's a literal physical thing. It's like a blip of electricity that travels from one point to the other. You are physically creating a physical thing that can be measured and seen when you create a new thought. So when you realize that every single thing that ever came to be in the history of time was at first a thought, whether it was in the shower or on the toilet or walking down the street, that's where it all begins. And if you realize that that's the case, you would take more time to audit your own thoughts, because if you change the way you think, you change the way you act, you change what you say, you change the way that you believe, you will ultimately change the actions of the people around you. And this can have a tremendous ripple effect throughout humanity, and ultimately has been the only thing that ever has.
Yeah. And I mean, if you're listening to this episode right now, first, all those great people you mentioned, Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King and all Rosa Parks and all these amazing people, understand that these people weren't the elite. These people weren't the individuals with hundreds of millions and billions of dollars. These were individuals who couldn't rub two pennies together, and they changed the course of the world. So if you're listening to this, you can change the course of the world, whether it is the vaccine COVID thing or something else. It's up to you. It's not up to the Bezoses and the Zuckerbergs, because guess what? They're controlled by the people we're talking about. So all these things are actually like, you have to be the person that steps up, man. So before I wrap up and get to the last question, I want to acknowledge you, man, for being one of those people to stand up, to speak up, to really make a ripple in the world. And let's hope we don't end up like Australia and Canada and every other place, right? And it's up to people like us to say something and to push back and to get uncomfortable and push through that fear, man, for sure. Now, before I get to the last question that I ask everybody on the show, let's get to the important stuff. How do people get a hold of you? Where do they find you? Where do they follow you? What's all that stuff?
So the easiest place is go to bobbysauce.com. The footer is all my links. I'm on Instagram at TakeNaps. I'm on Facebook, YouTube as Bobby Sausalito, on TikTok as TakeNaps with 2 S's. But if you just go to bobbysauce.com, in the footer are links to all my stuff. That's my merch store, and that's all things Bobby Sauce are there. Awesome.
By the way, where'd the TakeNaps thing come from?
So I was a domain investor. So I bought a ton of domain names in the early 2000s. And one thing that I learned about domain names in my web development world was that short, succinct, easy to spell names were always the best. Because a lot of the traditional names like phone.com or computer.com were taken, I would take action words like a verb, doing something, because it was short and memorable, but it was also longer than a single word, it was like a phrase. So I was looking for different words, and I was like, naps are luxurious. Let's see if I can find a word around naps. So it was like, I love naps. I want a nap. And then I just found TakeNaps, registered it in 2013. And I just thought, this is easy to spell, universally recognizable, doesn't pigeonhole me as to what the content could be about. And I didn't know what it was. It just sounded memorable.
I love it. I was just curious of that because I'm like, because you have that persona of Bobby Sauce, and I'm like, what's TakeNaps? Anyway, like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. Since the show is called The Growth Now Movement, that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
My biggest moment of growth. Interesting. Biggest moment of growth. I wonder what you would consider to be a moment of growth. I think it was what I would refer to affectionately as like decision day. And I talked about this on Bradley's podcast. I think I was 18. I was in New Hampshire at my favorite lake with all my buddies. And I feel like I've talked about like mushrooms and weed on this podcast, which is like not my life's definition, but it is something that has opened my eyes in a lot of ways. And I think is a good thing for certain people at certain times. I just decided this one day, I was like, I'm going to wake up at 4:00 in the morning and I'm going to eat some mushrooms and I'm going to kayak to the center of this lake. And I'm going to figure out what I'm going to do with my life. I literally said that. I asked if my friends wanted to go. They're like, I'm not waking up at 5:30. And I was like, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to come back to the shore until I figure it out. And that was the mission. It was like decision day. And I don't know what compelled me to do this, but I just remember thinking to myself, we just graduated high school. We got to figure out what we're about to do, or my senior year, whatever it was. And it was like, this is a time in life where if I could decide a path and pursue that path throughout my entire life, it would almost guarantee to work. It's like, I'm 18, I got my whole life ahead. When you read the book of your life going backwards, you would say, at 18, I decided to do X. And those stories would oftentimes be a success story. So I was like, this is what I'm going to do. So I kayaked to the center of this lake, and I'm just tripping out. And I'm like hearing what I would refer to as the hum of the universe, one of my buddies said. And I heard the hum of the universe, and I just felt at tremendous peace with the world. And I just realized a very profound thing, which is that I am in complete control of how I react to whatever this is. I don't know why I'm here, where it is, where we are, what this is, what the future may hold, or why I'm even in this place. But what I know for sure is that I can control the effort that I put into it, and I can choose the path, and the small individual decisions will take me ultimately to the right place. So it was like, all right, if you could do anything in the entire world, how would you do it? You would do it by deciding that that's what you're going to do. So I decided, I was like, I'm going to use the internet as a vehicle to take me where I want to go. I'm going to live on the beach. I'm going to be warm forever. I'm going to create a financial freedom. I'm going to have great relationships, and I'm going to fill my life with love and purpose and legacy. And every single thing that I can do, as long as it fits into this corridor of my direction, I'll do it. So it was like, if it's purpose, if it's love, if it's happiness, if it's freedom, I'm going to do it. And every single thing from that point on made sense, because I was like, all right, freedom, love, happiness, prosperity, purpose, legacy. Cool. Do that. Web development, work for yourself, be an entrepreneur, move to Florida, live by the beach. And then all of the things in my life, I've looked at the same way, where it's just like, I'm in control of this. I'm not in control of everything. I'm not in control if I get struck by lightning, but I'm in control of a lot of stuff. And if I can control what I can control and be at peace with what I can't, then I can ultimately have anything and whatever I want forever. And it will be a life well lived. And that was, I think, the greatest day, was the day that I just decided to decide.
I love it, bro. Bobby, thank you so much again for speaking up and being a voice at this very, very important time, man. Thank you also for coming on the show and spending some time with me, man. I'm excited to continue to stay connected and see how we can continue to support each other. This has been phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thanks so much to the people that are listening. I always say I appreciate their precious time. There's only so much time that we get in the world. So the fact that they would spend the time listening to, what I have to say and what you have to say today, I appreciate it so much. And thank you for all the good that you're doing and all the great stuff that you're putting out to the world. It's needed. And there's more people that are normal people, pants on, one leg at a time, just like us, that can do great things. So thank you.
Thanks, man. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the Growth Now movement. This is how you can really help me out. If you guys enjoyed this episode, please share it out on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. And let's grow this movement to epic heights. And it's all going to be because of you guys. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.